Well, good morning, magandang umaga, and welcome to today's episode of My PI Dream. Today we have a great episode lined up for you. I get lots of questions about alternatives to concrete hollow blocks, and that is what we're going to talk about today. Anyway, let's go ahead and get today's episode started. Now, without further delay, let's get today's video underway. Now, the contractor for this particular build right here is Rivercom Construction Development. I will also leave a link to their contact information if you're interested in building in the Philippines and you're looking for an alternative to some of the builders that we have presented in the past. Now, what makes this build different and unique from the previous new home build series that we've done in the past, both Villa Feliz, other projects, the new Canadian Neighbors build that we just did, is this right here. If you notice, this looks a little bit different, or maybe a lot different from the traditional concrete hollow block, which you'll see sitting right over here. Most of the builds here in the Philippines use the traditional concrete hollow block for the walls, for the wall structures, but the building here is using an alternative type of material, and it's these. Let's talk about what makes this build very different and unique from all the other builds that we have covered during the new home build series on My PI Dream. And you can see right off the bat that there is something very different here that we've never seen before, and it is these blocks right here. These are not your traditional concrete hollow blocks, which is what we see over here. Concrete hollow blocks, and this is the mainstay usually of most builds here inside the Philippines. But these are AAC blocks, AAC, autoclaved aerated concrete blocks, and it kind of gives away from the name a lot about what this is made up of and what the process is to make these blocks right here. We're going to talk about that. As you can see, we got here a little bit late in the game, but not late enough that we can't actually watch some of the processes that are going on here. But you can see a wall that's already been partially completed with the AAC blocks. Now, as the words within the name of the type of block here, aerated, autoclaved, the autoclave function on the blocks, autoclaved aerated concrete blocks right here, has to do with the manufacturing process that they created all these blocks. These are made in a manufacturing plant where most concrete hollow blocks, like these right here, this can be made in your backyard or on site. Most of the time they're made in like a mom and pop type of a concrete hollow block company right down the road in the local communities. But these are actually made and controlled, and they have a lot of quality control done to them in a manufacturing plant. Most of them on the island of Luzon, most of these are manufactured in plants around Manila, the Manila area. If you go down to Visayas, you'll find probably the plants that manufacture these in the bigger cities like Cebu. And then if you go down to Mindanao, probably around Davao, you'll probably see manufacturing plants that make things like this, but they're not readily available in some of the smaller communities. So you're probably going to have to reach out a little bit further toward the big cities to be able to get this type of building material for your walls. Now, while we've got both the concrete hollow block and an AAC sitting side by side, let's talk about the components that make up both of these units right here. Now, to get a better understanding of what makes one better than the other, or do some comparisons here, we really need to know what the makeup is of both of these. Now, concrete hollow blocks, a traditional method of building inside the Philippines, is made up of three basic components. It's sand, cement, and water. And the strength is based upon whatever that ratio is inside between the sand, cement, and the water. And we're going to talk about strength in just a little bit. Now, AACs use three of those same components, the sand, concrete, sand, cement, and water, but The sand normally used in AACs has a different characteristic of they normally use quartz sand and not traditional sand that they normally use inside concrete hollow blocks. There are additional components that give this some of its characteristics that we're going to talk about in just a moment, such as lime, calcinated calcium sulfate, another word for gypsum, aluminum powder, and it's a gas former inside there that has to do with the lightness and the aeration inside there. But again, we're going to talk about that also in just a little bit, and some other aeration agents. It can also contain fly ash, which can help reduce the permeability of the concrete, basically reduce the ability of things like water and anything to be able to make it through. It will repel that a little bit better, and it also gives additional strength to the building. And another thing about adding the fly ash is also helps prevent thermal cracking, and that happens when you have heat and coolness over time. That can actually cause some cracking inside components that are made with this type of material. Now, the next thing I want to talk about, a little bit about the manufacturing process, the process that separates the CHBs from the AACs here. And it's a significant difference, and it applies to a lot of the positive characteristics of the AACs themselves. Now, as we talked about earlier, the concrete hollow blocks, the CHBs, are made of 3 basic elements, and that's the sand, that is the cement, and the water. And they're very easy to make. They can be made right here on site if you have a mold in a mom and pop facility right outside the gate, in the local community, at hardware stores. They're everywhere. CHBs are made in a mold. Like I said, they're all built inside the mold, and they're put aside to cure, which differentiates the CHBs from the AACs. And the curing process for this is usually about 2 weeks. Sometimes they'll deliver it to you after 1 week, but it's normally 1 to 2 weeks for these to cure enough to where they have the strength from whatever the mixture is inside the concrete hollow blocks. Now, that's a problem with quality control that you're going to get a lot of time with CHBs, is because a lot of times you don't know what mixture that they use. Maybe they add a little bit more water, maybe they add a little bit more sand to save on that cement mixture inside there, and then you have less of compression strength inside your CHBs. And we talked about compression strength and some compression strength in previous videos here on My PI Dream, and we'll talk a little bit more about that today. But the thing is, this takes some time to cure. From the manufacturing to the actual installation, probably a minimum of about 2 weeks. And they have to be in a shaded area. They have to be watered every single day. Add water to provide the additional strength that you need during the curing process. Now, the process for the AACs is very different. AACs are done in a controlled environment. They are done in manufacturing plants because the normal mom and pop shop and the normal on-site shop doesn't have the facilities or the equipment to do these. Hence the autoclave portion of the AAC block. These are heated and are compressed in special type of molds to be able to achieve that desired characteristic, which is mainly strength, and it has to do with some of the chemicals or some of the building materials that are put inside that have to do with the aeration process. And we're going to talk about the aeration process in just a little bit. The thing about these, since they are manufactured in manufacturing plants, they're not everywhere. You're going to find these in big cities and maybe some distribution centers. You'll probably find this mostly around Manila. If you're down in the Visayas area, you'll probably find this around the Cebu area. Or if you're down in Mindanao, you'll probably find this maybe in the Davao area. Or what you'll find is some of the big plants are in Cebu, and they will distribute that to the other 2 big islands other than Visayas, up here in Luzon and down in Mindanao. But they have a very high quality control of the process of the manufacturing. AACs have been around for quite a long time, although not quite as long as concrete hollow blocks. We're going to do just a brief history on here. Now, the concrete hollow blocks have been around since the 1890s. They were designed around in the 1890s. Well, the AACs, you would think, oh, these were like new technology. Well, they're not. They were actually designed and implemented in the 1920s. So this is also proven technology when it comes to home build constructions. Now we're going to get into costs a little bit later on here on this episode, but let's talk about the price per unit of these units right here, and we'll talk about the comparison totally for the project costs, whether you want to go with the AACs or the concrete hollow block. And it all depends on your budget, I guess, as well. Anyway, if you go down today, if you look at today's date on today's episode, and you were to go down and buy a concrete hollow block, a typical 4-inch concrete hollow block of about 500 psi would probably sell for around 15 pesos per unit. So this right here is about, it's going to be around 15 pesos. The price will go up just a little bit depending on whether it's a 4-inch, 5-inch, or 6-inch concrete hollow block. Whereas your AACs, they sell for about, I'm going to say for about 150 pesos each. And you're going to say, James, wow, that is a crazy amount more for this than this right here. Well, when we get to the very end, you're going to be shocked, because the difference in the total project cost, your bottom line, is only going to be about 20 to 25% more for this. And I'll explain a little bit about that later on in the episode. Let's move from over here and let's actually go and see some of the construction. Now, before we go and we talk about the construction, the method that they're using to put this all together, to stack them, the adhesives that they use, I also want to talk about the sizes. What these are available sizes for the blocks. Now, typically concrete hollow blocks, if you go normally around here, they're really about 3 sizes. You're gonna find these in like 4-inch, 5-inch, and 6-inch concrete hollow block. When I say 4-inch, 5-inch, 6-inch, that is the thickness of the concrete hollow block. And you see, these are actually hollow, hence hollow block. So you're going to have to add additional mortar mix that goes inside here, whereas this is a solid unit right here. And that has a little bit to do with the price of the comparison when you're talking about these to these, when we were talking about that 20 to 25% more on the AACs. Now, what's nice about these manufactured AACs is you can order them on a lot of different sizes, more sizes. You have more options than you would normally find with the concrete hollow blocks. You can actually get these in 4-inch, 5-inch, 6-inch, 7-inch, 8-inch, 10-inch. You can get these in 10-inch and thicknesses from the manufacturer. You just you call in your request, and that's what they will build for you. And we have a good opportunity of watching them install and lay the AAC block right here. Now, what you're going to see that's very different from traditional concrete hollow block installation and laying and stacking of one block over the next is this. And this is the adhesive that they're using right here. And this will be a thin set type of adhesive, which will be a little bit different from the regular mortar adhesive that they'll use on the bottom. And we'll talk a little bit about the thicknesses of how you would actually apply the adhesive. Something, a good opportunity to see. You will not traditionally see anybody cutting a concrete hollow block with a something that's like a saw. But this is what you can do. This gives you additional options for modifying and having preciseness of your blocks and stacking everything, as opposed to concrete hollow block. Normally concrete hollow block, they'll crack it and with a hammer, and they'll break it, and it'll be very rough and not very precise at all. But this, you can get a lot of more precision using some of the tools that they have available for the AACs. Now, anyway, let's talk about the thicknesses a little bit. Now, normally, if you are doing concrete hollow block, you're going to have like a 1/4 inch to maybe a 1/2 inch of the mortar adhesive that you're using to assemble one block to the next. Here with the thin set, you're only going to use about 2 to 3 millimeters, which is it's maybe right around 1/8 of an inch of thickness of the adhesive that you need to get a very strong, very tight bond between each one of your AACs. Now, one of the biggest advantages to using AACs over concrete hollow block, other than the characteristics that we're going to talk about later on that have to do with your living inside the house, is the fact that these go up really quick. They're delivered to your site. You do plumb lines inside. You put a very thin line of adhesive inside here, and you just make sure that it's actually straight using your plumb line inside here. You make sure that it's level and then the wall is straight, it's plumb. And I want you to see something here. Do you see this finish right here? Look how clean this finish is as opposed to the concrete hollow block finish. Very, very different. And using AACs, you do not have to do plaster coat. You know, one of the biggest time consumption for doing construction of walls using CHBs is using that next coat of the plaster coat. It's basically like a mixture of cement and sand, and you're putting that in water, and you put that over there, and you build it up, and you do a bunch of the grading and the leveling and all. You don't have to do that here. What they'll do is they'll clean up some of the joints. Right on top of this, they will put skim coat directly on top of the AACs. We're going to talk about the process, the actual process for the first layer of the AAC blocks, and then the subsequent layers that go on top of this one. So I notice that this is thick down here. What is the thickness of this, and what type of a mortar are you using down here for the base level that goes on top of the slab?
We're using here, as you can see, we're using this common cement and sand mixture.
For the adhesive layer that you put for the block to block, the AAC block to AAC block, what do you use here?
Every layer of this AAC block, we're using, we're setting out minimum and maximum 3 millimeter. Every layer.
Yeah.
And you can see, there is also dowels, which is on the conventional CHB laying, it is also by every 3 layers, but the difference here is that this height of the CHB is already 30. That's why,
where traditionally CHBs are 20. 20.
That's
correct.
why every three layer you should use.
And normally it's every 3 layers with CHBs, but because they're smaller. But when you're using these, and these are bigger, you do these on every second layer?
Yes, sir.
A second layer. And I notice on CHBs, this would run all the way horizontally across the entire wall. But you don't do that when you're doing AACs. I notice the dowels, they just stick out and they connect right here. And there'll be a cut. You'll have a cut?
Yes.
Is that the way you do that? You do the cut inside here for setting?
We're cutting this part. Yep. So that this will not directly connected to the AAC, because considering that the AAC is not part of the structural part are the columns and beams. The load will not directly transfer to the beam and the column.
And I imagine that has a little bit to do with the seismic ability to make sure that you don't have any faults or cracks inside the
during
structure.
The earthquake or
So let's come over here and let's take a look at we were talking about the gap here, and the technical term for this is seismic gap. Seismic gap. It's almost like an expansion gap, which you would find in concrete, like on a sidewalk or something like that.
Yes.
But those are normally filled, but have a place for, if there's going to be a crack, it will be done here. But this here is actually going to be something that's going to be filled. And talk about what you're going to use to fill this gap up inside here.
We're using this backer rod. This is a
foam.
It will be inserted inside. Actually, this gap should be 15 millimeter.
Then for the covering that goes over,
we'll cover this with hybrid sealant.
It's almost like a silicone, like
a silicone, but it's not the common silicone, because if you will use common silicone here, the skim coat will not adhere to the silicone. So we're using hybrid type of silicone.
Then, since you're going to be using the skim coat on here, the skim coat will go right over the top of that special silicone that you're going to be using on that as well. Okay.
Then it should be seamless up to the column.
Okay. And then behind the gap, that air gap inside it, does that say an air gap, or is there something filled inside there?
Nothing.
Nothing that's filled inside there.
Because if you will connect this to the column, seismic gap is not already there.
Okay, okay. And the main reason, it's called a seismic gap, it's for protection against seismic activity, any type of earth movement.
Yes.
And you don't want your wall breaking, you don't want the interface, and this is normally where things would break. And it'd be very easy if you did get something if you got a crack here, this is much easier to fix than big
Yes,
cracks in the
than big
wall
cracks.
on either side over there.
Also this backer rod to cover this.
Okay, let's
Dowel.
talk a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about some of the reasons why people would want to go with AACs as opposed to maybe going with concrete hollow blocks. What is some of the special characteristics that people want to go with these?
AAC is an eco-friendly, lightweight, and cost-effective block. It is an earthquake, pest, water, sound, and fire resistant. Yes, it is soundproof, and it can last within 4 hours, more than 4 hours with
Also,
fire.
I get so many questions about people asking me on our channel, what can I do for insulation? Is there any type of material that works better than other for insulation? And that's what AACs are actually one of the biggest characteristics for that, because of all those additional materials, the aeration that acts like a thermal insulator inside there. Now, if you're looking at AACs to help on your electricity bill, these right here will help with your air conditioning bill, probably around 20, 25, 30% reduction of your costs, because they keep the cool air.
Air inside,
Cool air,
compacted inside.
Yep, and it keeps the heat on the outside from penetrating.
Not penetrating
Yeah,
inside.
because it's got like air, and it's the all those
Humidity.
yeah, all those different things that are different from concrete hollow block.
Yes.
The materials inside there, it's an insulator inside there. So that's one of the biggest things that my viewers are interested in. Waterproofing.
Yes.
That was on my list of things to talk about also, because it's kind of like impervious
Yes.
to moisture and all. Moisture, not just moisture, insects, termites.
Yes,
Pests,
yes, pests.
anything.
Yeah.
It will not penetrate inside.
Yeah. Also, when we talked about insulation, insulation not only works just for keeping the cool from your air conditioner on the inside and heat on the outside from coming through, it also works as a sound insulator as well. It works much better than does the concrete hollow block. Now, what I notice about concrete hollow block is I'm in a band, okay?
Yes, yes.
And we have a sound room set up, and the concrete hollow block, it just bounces. The sound waves just bounce, and we get feedback and everything. I actually had to put sound tiles inside. But these
Acoustic
tiles, yeah. So these actually add one more layer as far as audio insulation inside there that will reduce the amount.
Absorb the sound.
They absorb the sound. I noticed that AACs are very popular in very tall, high-rise building construction, and I think the reason is it's actually on Google. It reduces dead load. You're familiar with dead load of the building, especially for the tall building construction. I wanted to make sure we got that. Although this is a small building right here, it doesn't really apply quite so much to this. But when you have a lot of dead weight, a lot of weight that's pushing down, the more layers of weight, the building is more vulnerable to any type of, especially like a seismic event.
Yes.
in the basement of Villa Feliz. I have to apologize. I wanted to finish up over there on site, but my battery crashed out on me while I was in the middle of filming. But we'll just go ahead and conclude here and talk about just a few things that I wanted to take an opportunity to talk with while I was over on Bill's site. One of them I kind of discussed a little bit and had to do with cost. And I know there's going to be a weird rationalization if you're paying 15 pesos per concrete hollow block and you're paying 150 pesos for one of the AACs. How did I come up with about a 20 or 25%, only a 20 or 25% increase in pricing when you're doing the AAC blocks, when the AC block is like 10 times more expensive than the concrete hollow block? Well, that all takes into consideration all the other things that you have to do with the installation. When you do a concrete hollow block, you have to add other things like your mortar mix that you do for your filling, your curing time, the amount of time that you take because the blocks are smaller. You have many more blocks that are smaller to fill up the same volume area space that you would with AAC blocks. So what that does, it takes into consideration materials and labor costs that's involved. So that's why we come down from 10 times cost more from the AAC blocks from the CHB down to only about a 20 or 25% increase in price using those AAC blocks. And there's one thing else that I wanted to talk about that had to do with the disadvantage of using the AAC blocks. The mortar is very strong, and mortar is stronger than the components that they have for the build of the AAC block. So if you are going to put something that's a very heavy component on your wall, such as a big screen TV or a shelf that you're going to be putting anchors in and it's going to hold a lot of weight, then AAC blocks might not be the best choice for that segment of your wall. You might either want to use concrete hollow blocks that are filled with the stronger mortar mix, or what you might want to do is pour straight concrete inside there using formworks. Anyway, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And if you did, please give me a thumbs up. Please share, and if you have not subscribed, just click on that little My PI Dream heart in the bottom right hand side of your screen. You'll be subscribed, and if you ring that bell, you'll be notified the next time I upload a new video. So until such time from right here in the very beautiful Philippines, you have a wonderful and blessed day. If you enjoyed today's episode and you would like to see more just like these, just click on one of the helpful links over to your right and you might be able to pick up on some good information on DIY projects, how to, or if you are interested in moving to the Philippines and building, you'll find answers there as well.